The book was better.
Ready?
Wait, so on three?
Wait,
So I'm gonna say
wait,
1, 2.
wait.
Hold on.
So I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, record, and we'll all click record, and then I'll say
Okay.
1, 2, 3, and then we'll all clap.
Okay.
But wait.
Okay.
Who's going first?
Oh, I went first last time. So we'll have Alex go first because we always have the guests go first,
Okay.
and then you, and then I'll
Then
finish.
me, and then you. Okay.
Mhm. And then let me write that down.
Did you get that?
Okay.
Otherwise, we'll have the mess at the beginning of the episode that we have in
again.
50% of
Why
our
did I not?
episodes.
You
Why
guys
did I
have
not
been
do that
so
earlier?
good. The last couple weeks, you've been really good at like, oh, it's your
It's because
turn.
I've been writing it down in my notes. I'm like, I went first, or Taylor went first.
Okay.
Okay,
Now
All
we're
right.
good.
we're good. Okay. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, record. 1, 2, 3.
Oh,
And it's okay if it looks delayed because again, I'm just gonna line them all up.
okay. I think I clapped a little
the
early.
beauty of it all.
I can fix it in post. Okay. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Book Was Better podcast. My name is Kaylee Clark.
I'm Taylor Collette.
And today we are joined by a special guest host, Alex Criddle. Say hi, Alex.
Hi.
Alex is one of our Bookstagram friends. We met her through Instagram. Her Instagram account is just filled with lots of good book recommendations. She reads a lot. You read a lot
I try.
of books.
Yeah.
And
Right.
knowing you're a mom like me, I like admire that even more. Like, taking care of small children and then still finding time to like read is that's an additional challenge. Let's be real.
Let's just say TV and movies, that's when I read because they watch the same things over and over. And so I can just tune it out and focus on
You're
my
like,
book.
oh yes, Encanto for the 7th time. I'm gonna read my book.
Yes, that is the one that has been playing for the last 2 weeks.
Yes, same in my house. So, but we love Alex's content. If you want to check her out, her handle's just Alex L Criddle, and we'll have her like tagged in our description and whatnot. But she shares lots of really good reviews, not to mention just really pretty like book stacks and stuff. So
Oh,
if
thank
you're interested in books,
It's very
which why are
aesthetic.
you listening to this if you're not interested in books? But if your
Honestly.
books are your thing, then Alex is your thing. So she's over there on Instagram, so check her out. And we're super excited to have her because today we are talking about Pride and Prejudice.
Ba, ba, ba.
It is my all-time favorite book. So Jane Austen is my favorite author. So and happy belated Valentine's Day. So this is technically like our Valentine's Day special episode. So I mean, Valentine's Day was on Monday and this releases on Wednesday, but still happy love week, everybody. And even if you don't have a Mr. Darcy of your own, hope you had a great day.
Oh, Mr. Darcy.
Oh, Darcy.
Ugh.
Taylor, I can't
Darcy,
think
Darcy,
of any. I can't think of any announcements or any other things like news we have to share. Can you? This is
Nope.
normal. We never think about that stuff ahead of time. It's always in the moment. Okay, cool.
Then at the end of the
Well-
episode, we're like, oh, whoops.
Oh yeah,
That's
wait,
fine.
did we share this? Like,
Fine.
so cool. So then we can just dive into it with
Yeah.
my nifty little, starting lineup. Here's the spiel. So we are talking about Pride and Prejudice, the 2005 movie adaptation. And Jane Austen's work, Pride and Prejudice, was originally published back in 1813. And
Dang.
if my memory serves correctly, I believe this is the oldest book that we've talked about so far on the podcast.
The only other one was like Treasure Island. How old was that one?
That was 1883. That was a
Okay,
good
so yeah, no,
solid
this
like
is-
60, 70 years after Jane Austen. So
All right, so
well,
yeah,
I guess
no,
we
I
talked
don't
about
think
Jane
we've,
Austen's other book. We talked about
Emma.
we talked about Emma, but I can't remember right now when that one was published. I can't remember if it came before or after.
She's your favorite author.
Listen, I don't have her whole like. Listen, it should be in my notes. Why can't I find it?
Okay, I just looked it up. 1815, according to Google.
Okay, so yeah, Pride and Prejudice came out first. So oldest book that we've talked about.
There
Thank
you
you,
go.
Alex. Google is a thing. I could have done that.
Probably would have been quicker, yeah.
Probably would have been quicker than like just flicking through pages. It's fine. But we're excited. So Jane Austen, I mean, this is clearly the 2005 version is not the only adaptation. And it actually, if you're interested
Not by
in
far.
learning more about the other adaptations, that is what we'll be talking about in the Benisode next week. But our lineup here for the 2005 adaptation, we have director Joe Wright, screenplay Deborah McGough. I don't know. It's like Scottish, and I know I'm not going to do it justice. So, music. Oh, just a round of applause for the music for
Oh,
this movie.
the
It's just so
music.
phenomenal.
Okay,
Dario Marianelli.
yes, I have to butt in here. You guys always say the music is great in every episode. This tops it all. I mean, music,
No, it really does.
it's amazing.
Like,
Oh my gosh. I listen to this score when I write. I listen to this score when I just need to listen to something.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
When I
so
was
good.
in school, I would listen to it while I studied.
Mhm.
Like,
Me too. And I own the CD. So for the listeners who like remember CDs.
remember,
own
it
the
came out in
CD.
2005. CDs were where it was at still.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is how much I love it, that I own the CD and I still do.
And you
No,
still
and
do.
it's- and
That's
it's true.
the real test.
Yep.
We rarely have qualms about the music. Like the music is never bad, but like compared to the music for this film, maybe some of the other films' music is bad, just in comparison, because this one it's on its own level, I guess.
Yes.
You could
Oh,
say.
yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
For sure. So just man, Mr. Marianelli just really rocked it. But then also casting Gina J also did a phenomenal
Mhm.
job.
So
Just
good.
Perfect.
good. So very good on that front. I find it hard to believe that anybody is unfamiliar with the storyline of Pride and Prejudice, but because it's how this show works, the summary I shall give you is this: Elizabeth has prejudice. Mr. Darcy has a lot of pride, and they have to overcome those things when they fall in love with each other. So, hence the title,
What
Pride
a
and Prejudice.
summary.
No, it's like your classic, literally classic, published in 1813, classic like enemies to lovers
It's the
love
OG.
story.
It is.
It's
It really is.
the OG enemies to lovers.
I can't think of like a more classic tale that
it
has an
began the
enemies to
trope.
lovers.
It started it
Yeah.
all. Of
Mhm.
course, I didn't research that, but I'm making the claim. So
Claiming it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's pretty easy to believe, I think, that this is where that trope began. So it's just so fun, and it's Regency, Victorian era literature. Just Jane Austen was definitely pushing boundaries when it came to her strong female characters, especially when you look at the time. Sorry, Victorian lit studied a lot of that in school, and so that's going to come out, because that's part of the reason why I love Jane Austen, is because she was not only a phenomenal author, like the way she wrote characters, the way she wrote dialogue, just fantastic. But then when you look at the time she lived in and like the options that women had at that time, and then to see how she writes her characters, especially her female characters, is just chef's kiss. So that's where I'll leave it there. I just want to get into it. So let's just dive right in. As always, when we have a guest host, we will have Alex go first, and then I went first in the last episode. So it'll go Alex Taylor and then me, and we'll just round robin this until we're done. So
Okay, so first I have to preface this by saying that this movie was my introduction to Jane Austen. And so it holds a special place in my heart, and it's really hard to find things that are wrong with it. But reading the novel this time, which I have read so many times, like I probably can't even count on both fingers how many times I've read it, I really tried to focus on things that were different and that stood out to me. So going into that, but this first one is more of an anti-grievance, and so we'll start there.
Totally
So
valid, especially when the movie's this good. So.
I know, right? So in the movie there are quite a few scenes that take place at night, which is kind of strange because when you read the book, almost nothing takes place at night, except of course for like dinners and balls, which is totally normal. But I think they did that in the movie to make things more dramatic, because you have scenes like Mr. Darcy bringing Elizabeth the letter, and it's really dramatic with her in that scene, like looking in the mirror, and then you see the
Like
passage
the
of
sun
time.
setting and it just gets darker.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And then you have when Elizabeth,
So good.
oh, I know. When you have Elizabeth receiving the letter from Jane, and she finds out about Lydia, that's all happening at night. And then there's this, I mean, beautiful. And so like the shot that's outside of the house when it's like the night Bingley proposes, and then you see like the camera move from room to room, and you see all of the families, different reactions to that. And then of course we have Lady Catherine coming at night.
Her arrival in the middle of the night.
Oh, wow. I mean, again, all of these, I think because they're set at night, they make it more dramatic. But
Not to mention just it's a change of scenery, it's a change of
right, exactly. But I mean, in that time, in the Regency era, things were done properly. And so if you were to go over to someone's house, typically you would be invited, or you could go over in the afternoons, and they had specific calling hours when you could go over, and you didn't need to have, you know, an invitation. And that's not to say they didn't do things at night, because sometimes their balls would go well into the morning, as we see.
Like till literal dawn.
Yeah,
They did not know how to party in the Regency times. It was just proper partying. So.
So all that to say, it is not a grievance. It's just something that I noticed that, you know, it was a big change in quite a few scenes from the book.
I think my favorite is definitely because Lady Catherine comes at night. It's like they're like so disheveled and it's so dramatic, but then that also allows for like the sunrise walk.
Yes.
So I'm like, that's definitely my favorite of the night scenes.
It allows for Darcy to then travel all through the night and arrive just as the sun rises.
With the
foggy moor.
Without fully getting ready and his coat open and you can see his chest hair. That was like, whew, for that time. Oh my gosh. You can see a small portion of his chest. What is happening right now? It's like seeing a lady's ankles. Okay. But with you, for sure. Especially that, like, and it adds to just what I'll talk to a little bit later, but just like the scenes, like, and how they framed them.
Yeah.
Changing the setting tonight really like allowed them to do some cool stuff. So yeah, but that is a difference, and also would have been seen as improper in the actual time. So.
Yes, very much. Okay, my number 3 and my only actual grievance. I don't have much. Like you said, this movie's the best. It's just this was my first time reading this book, to the shock of many.
Yeah, including myself.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, because you're my sister, and I've read this book at least 15 times. So.
Yes. I just never really got around to it.
It's only Jane
it was always on the
most,
shelf,
like, well known and work, but it's fine.
It's fine. Anyways, so it was fun for me because I've seen the 2005 movie. I own it. I love it. I watch it all the time. And so it was fun to read the actual book that it's based on. And I noticed that the book is much more third person. Like, obviously the movie is third person, but you really follow Elizabeth and you follow like her discovery of things. They very rarely like move away from her. Whereas the book is very much, here's what's going on, and here's what's going on with everyone, not just Elizabeth. So you get a lot more insight earlier on into what's going on in Darcy's head, in Bingley's head, in like Mr. Collins and her parents,
Jane,
like really
everybody.
everyone. You know it before even Elizabeth does a lot of the times. Whereas the movie, it's very much you learn when Elizabeth learns. And I mean, obviously, the movie is great. I love it. I really like the way that they did follow the storyline with Elizabeth, but it was kind of nice to like see those nuances earlier on, especially with like Darcy and Bingley, to like be able to be like while Elizabeth is figuring stuff out. Whereas the movie, I feel like you don't see it quite as much because especially Darcy's so stoic, and he's supposed to be stoic. That's like good acting on the actor's part.
Good job,
don't get
Mr.
to
McFadden.
yes. But you don't get to see those inner thoughts that he has when he's it's giving me a thumbs up on Zoom. You don't get to see those inner thoughts, and you don't get to like kind of grow with the characters as much through the story. So that was one thing that I noticed for sure. That's it.
Yeah.
It's pretty short.
And I feel like in the book, you still obviously get this sense that like, no, Elizabeth's the main character.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But you still get this really nice background. Yeah. And like you get to look inside other people's minds, not just Elizabeth's, which is the benefit of third person in most cases, right? So
yeah. But it's funny because I feel like a lot of the times in the past episodes when we've moved from like a first person book to a movie, we're like, you lose so much because now it's in third person, not first person. And they almost flipped it with this one.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is different.
Still good, but different. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't know how I feel fully about it.
So my number 3, I'll talk more about that later. But my number 3 is, so they remove, and it's understandable, right? Like in every movie they remove some characters because they have to simplify it sometimes when they have a very large cast, or I mean, you just, this movie already has a very large cast. Like it's big. So it's not not understandable that they removed some characters, but they like specifically removed the fact that Mr. Bingley, like when he first comes to Netherfield, it's not just Darcy and Caroline that are with him. He has another sister and her husband who are also visiting. Yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Hurst is what they refer to them as, because again, his sister's married, so she's not Bingley anymore. And so a lot of the conversations then at Netherfield Park, at the original ball scene in town, all of that, it shifts a little bit because you have 2 additional people in the conversation who are changing the dynamic of the relationships in the conversation a little bit. So the biggest change I see that happens in the movie with the removal of those characters is the character of Caroline Bingley. Don't get me wrong, she is still pretentious and snooty and kind of a brat, I guess you would say, in
she's
in the
not
book
great
and the movie. But in the movie, they almost had to just make her like this sole villain kind of figure, where in the book you do get this feeling that she genuinely likes Jane. She genuinely thinks of Jane as a friend and enjoys Jane's company, especially because it's not just Caroline and Jane, it's Caroline, Mrs. Hurst, her sister, and Jane that like dine together and talk at events and things. And so it's different removing those additional characters. She suddenly becomes this snide. She's just snide the whole time. She's super unpleasant. Like,
Yeah,
she-
in the book, she definitely like has those moments, and I
but
wrote
it's
down in my notes.
specific only to Darcy and Elizabeth. Like, she sees
Yeah, I
that
was
Darcy
like, she's
isn't
very
as cynical about Elizabeth as everything else, and then immediately gets jealous. But she's not that way, like, to everyone else, whereas in the movie she is.
Mhm.
So
yes, she's much better at putting on a face in the book than in the movie. I feel like they don't even bother having her put up pretenses. She's just like, I hate all of you all the time.
well, and
but
it's
also-
funny.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go, Alex. Go.
Well, in the book, Caroline and Mrs. Hurst, because they're sisters, they're constantly talking to each other and gossiping and talking about what has happened. And so she has kind of a confidant to rely on. Whereas in the movie, I think some of her comments are more directed at Mr. Darcy, who, you know, sometimes he just like, you can just see he's kind of mentally rolling his eyes because he's like, no.
He's like, I'm not
Sorry,
here to be
exactly.
your, yeah.
Yeah.
You're-
So she
yeah.
she doesn't have that person to go to and to, like, you know, go in the corner and chat about whatever's happening,
Mhm.
especially with all the Bennets, you know, all the Bennets coming
Crazy,
in.
the crazy Bennett family. Yeah. But it's the biggest standout to me was, and I'm not going to be able to quote the line exactly, and I didn't write it down, is in the movie, Mary, when they're, you know, talking, when they go to visit Netherfield Park after Jane's been sick, and, you know, it's like the remaining sisters and Mrs. Bennet arrive, and they're talking about the ball that Bingley has to throw.
Mhm.
Mary's like, balls aren't great for conversation. Like, I'd much rather, you know, there'd be no music and just talking, blah, 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 blah. And then Caroline goes, but rather less like a ball, you know, in like this
Mhm.
snide kind of way. She's the one on the receiving end of that comment in the book. In the book, Caroline is the one that says, like,
Yeah.
oh, balls are too loud and too much. You can't have a conversation with anyone, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like her brother-in-law, Mr. Hurst or something, who's like, but rather less like a ball. Like, haha, you dumb woman. Like, it's totally different. Like, it's totally like a different, like, that was like a huge shift where it's like, she's the one who says Mary's line in the book. And she gets that, you know,
Mhm.
kind of like belittling comment in return. So it's just interesting by taking those characters out, like specifically Caroline,
Mhm.
she was just brought to a whole new level of villain, like,
Yeah.
in the movie,
Well,
which
a
was necessary, maybe.
Yeah.
But
Another character that comes to mind is Maria Lucas, who is
Mhm.
Charlotte's
Yeah.
sister. And, you know, she's not even mentioned. I don't even know if they mention that Charlotte has any siblings, because she has a
they
lot of
say
siblings.
when they first introduce her, they go,
Do they?
our eldest
Okay.
daughter.
Yeah. So
Okay.
But they never mention anything else about her
right.
siblings,
Yeah. So you don't see
You
that,
never see
but-
them.
But I love that Maria, when she goes to Rosings, you get to see through her eyes just how amazing and grand this place is. Because Elizabeth sees it, but it doesn't really affect her as much. And so,
Because
She's got more
Elizabeth.
on her mind.
right.
She's
Yes,
prejudiced
very
about
true.
these rich people.
Very true.
In the title.
And then the other person that I was thinking of is Mrs. Phillips, who is Mrs. Bennet's other
Mm.
sister, who's in town. And
Mhm.
she's not even in the picture either. And
That's
so,
a huge reason why the sisters even ever go to Meryton all the time.
right.
It's because they visit their aunt and go and talk with her and stay with
Mhm.
her, and she
Yeah, they don't
throws all
even
these
explain
social
that.
gatherings. She
Right.
throws all these social gatherings that all of the, you know, militia men can attend because
Mhm.
she's right there in town.
Mhm.
And that's how Lydia and Kitty get so close to so many of these military men as 15 and 16-year-olds. Like,
Yes.
it's
Yeah. They
a
don't
little
just go to
uncomfortable
town to
when you
look at
think of it that
ribbons.
way. Yeah, no,
Like, it's not,
yeah,
it's not
they just
ribbons all the
endlessly-
time.
just endlessly new ribbons, just all the time. Oh my gosh. I mean, maybe, because in the one scene where Bingley does show up, they're all like, the ribbons, and it's literally this
so many
massive
ribbons.
ball of ribbons
So
that they throw at Jane to hide. Like,
What are they doing
maybe
with
they
them all?
do.
What
Maybe
are they
they do
doing?
need new ribbons that often.
Maybe they
Simpler times, you know. So.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's my number 3. So
Okay. So my number 2, this is an actual grievance. Mr. Wickham's character is so downplayed in the movie. And oh my goodness, like he's so much more villainous and just awful in the book. And also just one other little thing is that he doesn't really interact with Elizabeth that much in the movie. Which I after reading the book and then watching the movie again, I was so surprised because he's around quite a bit and he interacts with her a lot. So some of the things that do happen in the book are he pays a lot of attention to Elizabeth, and there are so many people who comment and say, oh, you know, he's looking at you and he's gonna do something, he's gonna make a move. And then all of a sudden you have Miss King who comes in.
Yeah.
She has a fortune, and so now Elizabeth is like, who? Elizabeth what? Like Wickham goes after Miss King because of the fortune. And then this was a really big one to me, is that they don't mention his debts at all.
Oh yeah.
So you don't hear about you know, all of the debt that he rings up in Meryton, which we don't even know in the book how much he has in
how much it
Meryton.
is. Yeah.
But you assume, I mean, they've probably been there for months, and so I would imagine it's quite a few £1,000s. But one thing that they do mention particularly in the book is that when he's in Brighton just for a few weeks, £1,000 of debt. And so that is a lot of debt.
Racks it up real quick.
Yeah, so quick. And so you can only imagine how much he has in Meryton. And so much of the money that Darcy pays him, you know, to marry Lydia, is to pay off all of those debts. And then finally, one of the things that I think was kind of sad, but this kind of plays into Mr. Bennet's character in the book more, is that he doesn't even want to allow Lydia and Wickham into his home after they're married.
Yeah.
Because they're disgraced.
I get.
I was a
too.
little bit like, do I disagree?
Right.
Well, I think he even says something like, fine, Lydia can come back, but she cannot bring her husband. Like I think he ends up making some sort of compromise that like, okay, Lydia is welcome, but not Mr. Wickham. And then somehow Mrs. Bennet convinces him that they can both come. But
yeah,
I mean, like, I'm with him. I wouldn't want Wickham around.
Oh, I know, me neither. But yeah, so Jane and Elizabeth finally have to convince him to let them even come to the house after they're married.
Just once. Just to say goodbye.
Basically. And then
they do include though where Kitty says like, can I come stay with you? And then Mr. Bennet like immediately just goes, that is out of the question.
Yeah.
Like, no, like
not gonna happen.
Right. That is like a Papa Bear moment. No, she did this. You are not going down that same road.
Yeah. And where it's like not even like a minute, like she hasn't even finished saying it really before he's already answering like never.
Yeah.
No.
So we don't really get to see Wickham's character develop very much in the movie. And there's one moment at the very end when we last see him, when he and Lydia are riding away in the carriage and she's waving goodbye and he yanks her down. And so that's supposed to make us think that he's a bad guy, which I mean, we know that, but I think that they could have done they could have done more to, I don't know, to show
the scene that they cut that really like got me was where after they come back, after they get married, and like, you know, she goes with the mom into town to be like, I'm married. And Mr. Wickham goes like and talks to Elizabeth, and he's like, dear sister, and like, tell me, oh, you talked with Darcy, you saw him. Oh yes, I've heard that his sister's gotten so much better this past year. I'm like, bull crap, dude. You're the worst.
We hate him.
So
yeah.
I mean, this is kind of an honorable mention that I'll mention early, but I will just say that in general, something I noticed was, and again, because it's a movie and they were constricted to, you know, around 2 hours of footage, but that the movie had to combine a lot of scenes that in the book are two separate occurrences and maybe even
Mm-hmm.
happened like a couple days or even weeks apart,
Mhm,
that the movie had to kind of happen in the same scene.
mhm.
And frequently I feel like it still worked really well, and they didn't cut any of like the most important dialogue or anything with that. But I think a lot of the stuff with Wickham suffered with those changes because it did make it just seem very quick and
Mhm.
fleeting, whereas in the book it was
They hung
basically
out a lot.
him like
Mhm.
basically him like courting her for weeks.
Yeah.
And then like when he does pursue Miss King, Elizabeth's like, oh, I must have not been in love because like
Mhm.
honestly, I don't really care that much that he's gone after Miss King. So I guess
Mhm.
maybe I didn't like him that much. So yeah, you lose all of that. And I feel like you lose a lot of Elizabeth like learning about herself
Yeah.
and kind of like
Good point.
understanding better her perception of men. And then that also shifts to obviously Mr. Darcy
Mhm.
through all of that.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good point.
Excellent point. Yeah. And especially because we'll talk about it more next week, but is like a BBC series of Pride and Prejudice,
Yeah.
Yes.
which, because it's a series of, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's like 4 or 5 like hour-long
feel like-
episodes.
It would
I-
be 4.
I
I
think
feel like
it's-
5 would be a weird number.
I think it's 6 total,
Oh, is it even
6 would make
I don't
sense. I'm
know.
like, it's either
Yeah,
4 or
it's
6. It's not
long.
5.
but it's so
Five,
good.
five
though.
is still a nice, multiples of 5. That's still a solid. 7 would be weird, but 5's fine. But like you when a story has been adapted into something that is, this is 2 hours, and I think the runtime's like 2 hours and 13 minutes compared to 6 hours
Mhm.
of footage telling the exact same story, where like there are ways that could show the whole thing, it can be hard, but doesn't make me love this movie any less. So.
No, not at all.
But
Okay.
Taylor only has anti-grievances remaining, so
Because this
she's not
movie's
biased
great.
at all.
I'm here to play advocate for all those people who have a hard time reading Jane Austen's writing. That's what I'm here to do.
She's not that hard to
Um,
read. I don't get why people think she's hard to read. She's not Shakespeare.
Kaylee, you're an English major. You cannot say anything. You have a
Just saying,
skewed perspective.
Try to read The Fairy Queen in the original Old English prose, and then tell me that Jane Austen is hard to read. Just tell me that.
I'm not saying she's impossible to read. She is. I'm able to read it. It's just it's not a quick, easy read by any means. Like I have to put some brain power into fully understanding what she's saying.
Oh, heaven forbid you have to use your brain.
Look, I don't have a lot of brain power to spare right now.
I am also an English major, so I'm on Katie's
See?
side. Sorry.
I'm here for the
Listen, try to read Shakespeare's plays instead of see them played out in front of you. Try to read anything like
I don't want to.
Elizabethan
That's
era
why I
and not
didn't
Victorian era.
major in English. Oh, anyways. So my number 2 is it is a major anti-grievance. I think that the movie did a great job at
Major,
adapting
okay.
the
Careful what you say
confession
about my favorite
scene
book.
where Mr. Darcy. You have to agree that this scene they did a great job.
This scene is it's really good.
The confession scene where Mr. Darcy first confesses his feelings to Elizabeth. In the movie, it's like raining and they like get so close to each other and like the tension is there and it's just
palpable.
tangible in the
Oh.
air. Yes.
And his eyes
And
flick down to her
then
lips.
they like
I know,
yes.
it's
Oh.
like the subtle things.
And it's just oh and it's gorgeous.
And it's
like in this
when
like,
his hair's
marble
wet, it like
structure.
It makes like his hair
Yes.
darker and his skin like paler. And then
Mhm.
it's like those close-ups on his like bright blue eyes.
Oh,
It's just-
Mhm.
yes.
and it makes like
Now let's
it makes like Kira Elizabeth's lips like a little bit more red and like full from the cold. And it's just
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, how much thought went into this scene.
It's so good. Now let's compare it to the book where it's just at the house and he comes in and they just talk and he
It's
says
the way
it,
it
she gets
properly would have
mad,
happened in the time.
and then he
Yeah.
leaves. So boring. I want passion.
Oh, we get
I
it in
want
the
it to
movie.
be pouring rain and dramatic. It's beautiful. So yeah, that's my number 2. I think that the confession scene, they took the essence of it. Like some of those lines are word
Oh,
for
they're
word
word
from
for
the book.
word.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like amazing job. But then they put it in a better place with more
They
tension.
Hollywooded it. That's a
Yeah.
verb now.
Didn't over Hollywood it, because we've seen some movies where they over Hollywood.
I'm
some
not again.
stuff.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's
Yeah.
it's a classic Hollywood thing to take
Yeah.
things from books that weren't originally that dramatic and making them more dramatic. And then
Yes.
in this movie, they don't overdo it. So
No, they
No,
don't.
I think that this was the perfect scene to do that, along
Mhm.
with a couple of the other scenes that they do it. They don't
Mhm.
overdo it, like you said. So it almost makes it more intense because it's pretty prim and proper up until that point. And then it's like all bets are off.
Yeah.
They're breaking free.
bring in the High School Musical soundtrack, okay?
I don't know.
Even
don't know
just
how
going
else
back to the
describe it.
music, when she's running across like the bridge, or that music just leading into that scene. Oh, it's
And then
perfect.
the drop of music,
Yes.
like when she
Mhm.
turns and
Mhm.
sees him there, the music's almost it's like entirely gone.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
all you can hear is the rain. Like
Mhm.
that conversation happens without background music. It's
Right.
just the sound of the rain
Mhm.
and just
And then
it's so good.
after the music like swells back up again as you're like,
Mhm.
oh, what just happened?
Yes.
So
Oh,
good.
it's so
Oh,
good.
it is one
So
of my
good.
all-time favorite scenes in all of cinema history.
Mhm. I agree. Absolutely.
So
It is
had
it's really
to
good.
had to point that
And
out.
you know, it's a pretty good segue into my number 2, because my number 2 is just in general the glorious cinematography in this movie. The
so
fact that when
good.
like new
Mhm.
scenes
So
start,
good.
like the framework and the setup for these scenes, it's like looking at a painting from that era.
Mhm.
Like them sitting down at the table, or Georgiana at the piano with Darcy standing there, and you've got just that shot with like his back and her playing on the piano. It's just over and over again. It's like a painting, but it's real life in this movie. Like the way it's set up, like those are real people.
Mhm.
And of course, like the costuming and everything it plays into like the
So
realism
good.
of that and
So
just how
good.
believable it is.
Right.
But I mean, like, yes, we've talked about how amazing the music is, but the thing that stands out so much to me in this movie is the cinematography. Like
Mhm.
I can't name another movie where like the cinematography stands out to me
Mhm.
the way this one does. So I did write
Well,
down
it's
who was
like
in charge of
this-
that, and his name was Roman Ozick.
Oh, okay.
So
Roman.
Roman, you just really knocked it out of the park.
Round
with
of
this
applause.
one. It was so good. Like, just, oh my gosh. Like, and I've seen this movie. I mean, this is like my
lot.
comfort movie.
Me too. It's mine
Like,
too.
Mhm.
It's my comfort. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen it, is how
Mhm.
many times I've watched this movie.
Yep.
And like, there are scenes and moments where I still tear up and like cry because the way it's set up and shot is so beautiful. And then you add the music and everything. And I'm just like,
Mhm.
I could live watching this movie on repeat and just be happy.
Yes.
So good. So
I will
Yes.
say, like, the scene that Alex mentions when we're talking about the night scenes, like the one where it goes through the house,
Mhm.
like through the
Mhm.
windows and
Like, it's
shows all
beautiful.
of them. Gorgeous. Like,
Mhm.
such a cool concept, the way that they do
and
that.
it's seamless. It's seamless the way
Yeah.
they do it
Yeah.
too. And
Yeah.
and then also with the scene where she gets the letter, she's read the letter, and she's just like there, just like processing it.
Mhm.
And the way they show that time has passed, or where she's on the swing after Charlotte has
Oh, I
killed
love
her.
that scene.
Yes.
And
And
it's
she
just
just
like
goes
she's
around
spinning,
and
and you can
around.
see the time that has passed,
Time.
because the book very easily can show and explain how much time has passed.
Mhm.
And the movie has to allude to it to tell you
Mhm.
that, like, hey, these relationships aren't just happening in a matter of weeks. Like, it's been like a year. It's been like 18
Yeah.
months between the
Mhm.
time when we're
Mhm.
first introduced to, Bingley and Darcy
Mhm.
versus when, like, Jane and Bingley finally are married and Lizzie and Darcy are finally married. Like, it's
Mhm.
not a quick
Ooh,
little thing. Like, and they have to allude to it, and the cinematography really helps with that in a lot of cases.
I thought of another gorgeous scene. The one where she's standing on the edge
Another,
of the cliff.
it's all of
Oh,
them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yes,
the
that one.
classic.
That one, I mean,
It's the DVD menu scene. It's that
Yeah,
music, the
it
swell, the
is,
high
yeah.
piano, and then just her standing there on the cliffs. Like,
Mhm.
oh, gorgeous. Or
Well,
when they're
even-
when they're at Pemberley and they go through and they like, I'm so glad they switched it from a painting to a bust, by the way. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Hey,
I
also,
think that it's
guess
more
what?
dramatic.
Guess what? You can go tour that actual house.
Yes,
in
you can.
England, and that bust
Oh.
is there for
I
you
need
to
to
view.
do that.
Oh,
I need to do that.
me too.
I wanted to do it when I did my study abroad and was living in England. But unfortunately, that like house that they use is pretty out there in like the middle of nowhere and like not near like anything else.
Well,
So it
look how
would've been
big the
like,
land is.
Yeah.
I know, it would have been like a
Gorgeous.
full day of like traveling out there just for like a couple hours just to travel all the way back to London. But it is my goal. It will one day happen.
Yes. I love also the subtleties that they did with the cinematography. Like, we have to talk about it. I'm going to bring it up. The hand flex scene.
I don't know if that was so much cinematography as it was like the director and
But
how
then-
he directed
yeah.
No, do you know
him to like,
I just read an article about that like 2 weeks ago, and Matthew
Here we
McFadden,
go.
he actually did that just like during a take, and like they during
I
a
love when that
rehearsal take,
happens.
and
And
but
then they
the
were
good
like,
on
"Ooh,
him."
keep that."
right, yes, the director though, to his credit, the director noticed it and he was like, okay, we got to get a close up on the hand. And so
Oh, what's awesome is that's not the only time in the movie that like just like
No.
a slight brush of hands like
mhm,
totally throws like Mr. Darcy through it. Like
yes,
there's other scenes where it's more subtle, but it's
Mhm.
like after he first notices her at at his house and
mhm,
she like leaves and it like
yes,
zooms down to his hand where he's just like slightly like trembling just like a little bit. And like
mhm.
there's other things where it's like
Mm-hmm.
the tells and like the amount of sexual tension exists in these slight touches and like
Yes.
hand gestures is phenomenal. Like, it's amazing. It's amazing.
so good.
All I want is somebody to flex
I
their
just-
hand like that. Like, cool. You held my hand for 2 seconds and it like, put you through such an emotional like roller coaster of effects that you just
roller
have to, like,
coaster.
flex your hands just to like get the tension out of your body. Like, come on, just from touching my hand. That's the dream. That's the goals. This is why I say Darcy and Elizabeth are goals.
Oh man, it's so good. It's so good.
It's so good.
I mean, we
And-
could go through the movie scene by scene. Really,
We
each
could.
one
We
is
could.
just so
It's a-
good.
It's a masterpiece.
It really
Did
is.
it
Yeah.
win any like awards? It should have.
It was nominated for a few Oscars, I remember. I don't know if it won any though.
Here, let's all.
Let's
Google
all-
Yeah,
it.
we're all Googling.
A BAFTA award for outstanding debut by a British actor. Satellite award for best costume design. That's it.
The costume design was really good. Okay, what about nominations? Award Nominations, because if it wasn't
For-
nominated for something with cinematography, I'm like,
Oh,
but
no,
yeah,
it was
there's a lot of
nominated for
nominations.
best actress, best art direction, best bunch of stuff.
Mhm.
No, best cinema. It was European Film Award for best cinematographer.
There you go. Yeah.
Mhm.
I was going to say, give Roman his accolades. He deserves them.
Yeah.
Give Roman the credit he deserves.
And it was nominated for best original score. So again, back to that music.
Yeah,
Okay, also
there's the music.
giving good old Mr. Marianelli his
Yes.
accolades as well. They deserve all the
Good.
accolades. That's a fun word to say, so I just decided to use it a lot. That's a couple
Accolades.
sentences. Okay, well, I mean, I guess nominations are, I'll take it as long, at least it was nominated, even if it did win. But who did win that year? I want to know then.
Who beat
my
them?
doubts. I have my doubts that they were actually better, but it's fine. Alrighty. We've already mentioned some honorable mentions, but
We'll talk about
here's
more.
our time to mention the remaining ones we have. The big one I have is that I just really liked the kind of tomboy look they gave to Lizzie. Like, of course, she was still feminine because of the time period. Like, women couldn't wear pants or anything,
Mhm.
but how you can tell compared to her sisters that she's wearing older dresses or, last season's dresses. She doesn't take as much time with her hair and making it as neat and tidy because she just doesn't care as much. And I feel like that was a really clever take on Elizabeth's character in this adaptation that you don't necessarily see in other adaptations, but I think is very fitting to who she is, and I like it.
Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah, I will say one thing that I noticed in the book was that Lizzie sings as well as plays the piano.
Mm.
Whereas in the movie, they were just like, nah, she'll just play. We don't need the singing.
We don't need to force young poor Keira Knightley into singing and playing the piano.
But they did keep Mary singing,
Yes.
which was
Mhm.
interesting.
They did.
Because it's like, I feel like in the movie, it's more dramatic because you're like, oh, she's singing too. What
Mhm.
the? Okay.
Mhm.
Whereas in the book, I'm like, oh, everyone sings. It's not as
It's expected
dramatic.
of a young lady.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like, it's just
Right.
that she is maybe not the best at it.
Right.
Or
That
she
your heart.
chooses the wrong songs.
Yeah.
Or Mary just
Right.
isn't good at reading a room, and so she wouldn't
No.
play the right kind of songs.
Yeah.
That was the
Right.
big critique on Mary is
Mhm.
Hmm.
it's a party and she's playing these slow, somber like ballads kind of thing.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
Yeah, that goes into one of mine, which is Mr. Bennett is so much more caring and just kinder in the movie, so
Mhm.
in that moment when Mary's playing and then he's like, I think we've had enough, and then like a few moments later you see him comforting her and he's hugging her and she's crying.
Yeah.
And in the
You
book
don't
he
get that
he
in the book.
he doesn't really care about his daughters.
only Elizabeth. Like,
Yeah,
it's
right.
so like painfully
It's-
clear in the book
yeah.
that like Lizzie is his favorite.
Yes.
The frivolity that the others like partake in, he wants nothing to do with. So-
See, and
Yeah.
another thing that I thought was so interesting that the book like straight out comes and says it's like they got married and then he kind of like fell out of love. Now he just kind of doesn't care anymore and just likes to read his books.
Yeah,
I
he
was
just
like,
sits in his
oh.
library.
I was
He
like,
just wants
in
some
the
peace and
movie,
quiet.
in the movie, I thought it gave at least like some allusion to like him like still loving his crazy wife.
Mhm.
The book just kind of is like, nah.
The book still had some tender moments between him and
But
his
it's
wife and
straight up
him playing
comes out and
jokes and
says
like
he doesn't love her.
I
It
don't
has a
remember
whole
reading it
paragraph
outright
on
saying that. I don't
I
remember
just
reading that
read
it
it
outright
because I
said
just
that.
finished the book today. So it's very fresh in my
So is it
mind.
in the end of the book
And
or
that
the
scene, I
beginning?
was like, it's in chapter. Hold on, I'll tell you. Chapter. It's somewhere around the chapter 51 mark.
Okay.
So it's towards the end.
Okay.
But it's just like a short, like 2-paragraph thing about the dad, and that's where it talks about how he just loves reading and he
Mm.
likes to like hang out in the library.
Maybe I
And
just-
that's what he likes to do because
Yeah,
he
just
doesn't really
skipped right
care for
over
his
that.
wife or his daughters except for Lizzie. And I was like, okay.
I mean,
So I
Mrs. Bennett
appreciate-
is a little much, so I don't blame him in trying to get away from her most of the
No,
time.
she's a lot.
My poor nerves. Okay, lady. We all have poor nerves. Try living in the 21st century. We're all anxious and depressed. It's fine.
And then I think
Especially
it
right now.
also honestly, I think it also talks about how like they kept expecting a son. Like
Yeah.
even after
Mhm.
Lydia was born, they were like, we'll have a son.
Hmm.
We'll have a son. And they just never did. And
Yeah.
it just then they had to like make peace with the fact that they were gonna lose the land and the house and everything. So that was also interesting to
Mhm.
read about in the book.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Adds to the tension of Mr. Collins, which,
Mm-hmm.
speaking of Mr. Collins, another honorable mention.
man.
Mr. Collins in the book is supposed to be big. Like,
Mhm.
he's not like the small man that he
No,
is in
but
the-
I
but I don't
the
I don't
casting.
disagree with the change. Like, I thought that it was phenomenal the way it was like such a big personality in like a
Mhm.
smaller man.
Yeah.
And the dynamics and things that it played out there was
Oh, when he goes up to Mr.
Pretty
Darcy,
entertaining.
who is so much
So
bigger
much
than
taller.
him.
so much taller.
He's like,
So good.
And it's literally Mr. Darcy like turns around and then like looks
Yeah.
yes.
like, what is that? Is that a fly? What am I hearing?
Yes.
Well, and maybe because of his size, because this is something that I also mentioned, is that Mr. Collins is a lot more feel sorry for him in the movie, and maybe because he's smaller, we kind of feel
Yeah.
even sorry for him.
Like, oh, he's so
Yeah.
cute and little. Like,
He's so tiny and awkward.
whereas the book describes him as, you know, like broad and a little like pudgy and like he's a larger dude who wouldn't probably, you know, be as intimidated or look, you know, tiny and unimportant next to these other gentlemen.
Mhm.
But it was
It's
an
hilarious.
interesting, definitely interesting dynamic change
Mhm.
in the movie.
But
that
it
was-
works.
Yeah.
I think it works.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, it's also interesting. I mean, I love Keira Knightley as Elizabeth. I think the casting was amazing there. But I feel like the book talks about a lot of people who are taller than her. Like it mentions a lot taller than Elizabeth. She was
Mhm.
taller than
The
Elizabeth.
same,
Taller than
about the
Lizzie.
same height as Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Oh, about the same, yeah.
Whereas in the movie, I feel like she's one of the tallest. Like Kitty and
I'm
Lydia
Googling
are
another
supposed to
thing.
be
How
taller
tall
than her.
is Keira
Oh,
Knightley?
you're right.
Like they mentioned, like Lizzie's one of the shortest of the sisters, whereas
Mhm.
that's definitely not the
Well,
case.
yeah,
in the
right from
movie.
the beginning, where they're
Right.
all like, "Oh, poor Lydia, you're the youngest," and she's all like, "I don't care because I'm the tallest."
Mhm.
Yeah.
Keira Knightley is 5'7", so she's your height.
That's
to be.
average height. I'm
Mhm.
5'8".
She's not-
Thank you very much.
No, you're 5'7".
I am. The doctors
You
say
grown?
5'8", so
Okay, well, okay. Pretty sure I was more than
You're
an inch
taller
taller
than-
than you.
no,
I'm
you're
5'9".
taller than you think you are. Sure
There's
you
no way I'm taller than 5'9", though. Okay, whatever. It's fine. That's not what this
Anyway.
conversation is about. Podcast with sisters.
And
Okay.
it does prove that height among sisters is an important thing.
It's important because I'm the tallest of all of our sisters. But I'm
For
the
now,
second.
I don't know. Our youngest sister, we
Our
don't know how
youngest
tall she's
sister
gonna
could
be.
be taller than me. She's only 13. Oh my gosh.
Yep. So we'll
She
see.
just turned 13. It's weird.
That's true. Happy birthday.
Compared
Rachel. Shout out
to
you.
Matthew McFadden, Mr. Darcy is 6'3".
Yeah.
So, tall, dark,
Nice
and
height
handsome. The
difference.
birth of the trope.
Yes, tall, dark, and handsome.
Jane
Yes.
Austen was just very cutting edge with the romance genre. Okay, like enemies to lovers, check. Tall,
Yep.
dark, and handsome love interest, check.
So good.
All good things. All good
Um,
things.
Anyways, what other honorable mentions did I have?
I have a lot, but we haven't even gotten to our number one yet. So it's like we need to keep
And we're like
going.
an hour in.
Can I just mention one more really quickly?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so this one scene just always makes me smile so much, and it's right after Bingley and Darcy return after, you know, they've been away, and they come back and they come into the house, and it's right before all of the women are like trying to hurry and get things put into place because they're just laying around. But after he basically forgets like what he's going to say and what he's going to do, and so there's that scene where they're outside of the house, and you know,
And Mr. Darcy pretends to be
Yes!
Jane.
yes, we're kind of far away, and it is so precious. I love both of them in that moment. And yes, exactly, when Mr.
And
Darcy,
it's like, yes, they're best friends. Like,
Yes.
best friends
Oh.
back then, best friends now. Like,
yes,
you're gonna play the roles for each other.
exactly. And I love seeing that. And Mr. Bingley, he walks up and he's like, Miss Bennet, and then Mr. Darcy bows, Mr. Bingley. It's just so perfect.
So good. It's so good.
Yeah, I think
We were
like,
supposed to walk in and they were gonna say sit down. And he's like going over like, why didn't it
and I
happen the
think
way in
that
my head?
it makes up for a lot of the like connection. I feel like you get more of the friendship and how like dear the friendship is to them.
Why
in the
Bingley
book.
put so much trust in
Mhm.
Darcy's word.
Yes.
And I feel
Mhm.
like that scene kind of helps make up for that in the
Mhm.
movie. And you're like,
Mhm.
oh, they're the best of friends.
Yes. And you also start to see the softening of Darcy in that, because it's like, oh, he actually is a good guy and he cares about his friend and he's playing along with this with this
And he's
charade.
pretending to be this lady for
Yes.
his friend.
But
and
it
then,
also shows
sorry, I hit my
how
mic.
much he wants to make up for the wrongs of his past. Like,
Mhm.
Surely
like
you must
he,
know it was all for you.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, my heart.
Oh, yes.
yeah,
And then right after that scene, when Bingley goes back in, we get that shot of Darcy walking away and he's looking back at the house.
And Elizabeth is
Oh,
outside at
yes,
the
and
tree.
she's outside
And it's
by
like,
the
does he
tree.
know? Does he
Uh-huh.
know she's outside?
Yes.
yes. And then you get again the beautiful foggy
Mhm.
scene with him
Yes.
walking towards her,
Oh.
and then the little forehead touch
And the lights coming
with the
through.
sun.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
It's so good.
If you haven't seen this movie, what are
How?
you doing?
Why? What is your life?
Go watch it right now.
Right now,
I don't
stop the
care if you're a
episode.
man or you're a woman or you're a child or an adult. This movie is for everyone.
Yes.
It honestly is so good.
It is so good.
Okay,
Okay.
we should probably
We'll continue now. Alex, what's your number
Yes.
one?
Okay, so my number one is that Mr. and Mrs. Gardner's characters are so different in the movie. Oh my goodness, there's so much. So we do have them in the movie, but they are much older, and they don't have any children in the movie. In the book,
Mhm.
we know that they specifically have 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls, and it also tells us in the book that Mrs. Gardner is several years younger than her sisters-in-law, which are Mrs. Bennet and Mrs. Phillips. And so because of that, she has a really close relationship with Elizabeth and Jane. And so I think that, I mean, I can imagine they're probably maybe 10 to 15 years apart, you know, maybe a little bit more than that. But I think
In my head, yeah, because in my head I see that like they specifically say in the beginning of the book
Mhm.
that Mr. and Mrs. Bennet have been together for 20 and 3 years. So, or
Yeah.
3 and 20, you know, however to say it. So 23 years.
Mhm.
Knowing how they work back then, let's say Jane then is like 22, you know,
Mhm.
like
Right.
and
And we
the
know
kids-
that
and-
we know that Lizzie is 20. That is
yeah. So
Well,
it's like
and-
they just
and
kind
they
of started
say-
having daughters.
They
after
say that
Mhm.
Jane will soon be 20 and 3. They do mention that.
Mhm.
So
So, and I think by the end of the book, Lizzie's like 21, but still,
Mhm.
like
Right.
they're. And I pictured, the Gardners as being in like she's like in her 30s,
Right.
So they're in like their early 20s, and she's in her 30s. Like
Mhm.
I'm in my 20s, and I
Not a
friends in my
huge
30s. You
difference.
know what I mean? Like yeah,
Mhm.
like that age
Right.
difference.
Right. So I'm sure Mr. Gardner is probably older, which was totally normal, but
Would
Mrs.
be
Gardner
way normal.
specifically was much younger. So then another thing is that in the movie, to me, it seemed implied that Mrs. Gardner is Mrs. Bennet's sister, because there's that one scene where Jane is going away and she says, say hello to my sister or whatever. And I don't know if that's just her being kind and, saying hi, but like, wouldn't she say hi to her brother because her brother is her actual brother? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But in the book, Mr. Gardner is Mrs. Bennet's sister. And so that is made much clearer in there. So
Which then is confusing because then it makes sense. That makes more sense with her later comments when Mr. Gardner, Mrs. Bennet's brother, pays, right? Because they had no idea that Mr. Darcy also, paid Mr. Wickham, that he paid. And then, her flippant comment of like, why shouldn't he? Like,
they don't have
he's
any
got
children.
much more money than us, and they have no children. Like it makes more sense for her to say that about her own brother,
right?
Versus
yeah. And so then just going further into that, the Gardners themselves play a really big role in the romance that happens between Darcy and Elizabeth, because when they plan to travel with Lizzie, they specifically plan to go to Lambton, which is where Pemberley is, because Mrs. Gardner lived there for quite a few years. And so she knows the area. And so they, in the movie, it's like their carriage breaks down, I think, and then they're just, sitting on the rock, and then they're like, oh, we're near Pemberley. And Elizabeth is like, oh, we are.
She's like, and they're like, yeah, let's go tour. And then that leads to the, he's so rich.
Yes.
Wonderfully, so eloquent Lizzie, just so great.
Yes. And so that, in the movie they make it seem like they just kind of happen upon Pemberley, whereas in the book they specifically go there. And because of that, later on Darcy and Elizabeth credit the Gardners with simply bringing them together and allowing them to meet again, and then to basically start their romance. And finally, the very last paragraph is about the Gardners, and it's about how Elizabeth and Darcy are very close with them, and they're constantly visiting each other, and they're very happy with their lives. And so I think that that's just so significant. And these two people played a really big part in so much of what happened. And in the movie, they're there, and that's about it. I mean,
they're a means to an end. They're like the reason that Lizzie goes to Pemberley, and that's pretty much it.
And that's it. Yeah, exactly. So I wish that we got more of their relationship with Elizabeth, with Jane too, because Jane doesn't really interact with them very much either. So
when really she watches their kids.
Right. Exactly. So that's my number one.
Good point. That's something.
Oh, right. I'm next. Sorry. I was just nodding.
You are. You're like, great.
Yeah, great.
Smile and wave,
Anyways.
boys. Just smile.
Yes. Kaylee, did you have something to add before I go on?
Well, I just think that's interesting because that I do feel like they are a significant aspect of the book, and the way that the main two characters and the love interests get together. But it's not just this adaptation that I feel like they're a little bit snubbed. Like I feel like they get snubbed in every single adaptation, like that's not really highlighted. So it's just interesting. It was just a little bit of reflection because I've seen so many versions of this story. So okay, Taylor, what's your number one? Another anti-grievance.
Here we go. This is the biggest anti-grievance of them all. And I know many people will disagree with me.
She's about to make me mad. I can
present company included. The movie, for the most part, covers all the same scenes carefully as the book. I don't like when I went to read the book, I feel like I was expecting to get more than I did. All I got was more dialogue that I didn't feel was necessary.
More snubs that Jane Austen's writing. The
I just feel
dialogue
like
isn't the
some
best
of
part.
some of the scenes were
It's
so
funny.
drawn out. They were just
But it's
talking
funny.
and talking and talking. I was like, okay, I get it. You can move on.
What else did they have to do with their time back then?
I But I was expecting like a whole scene to be cut or something. And there were a couple
Nope.
scenes, but none that were like
Nothing
essential to
big.
the storyline.
Mhm.
Like it was every like chapter that went by, I was like, so when's it gonna like be different? Because I'm just so used to books being like so different than the
Significant.
movies.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like look at the past 36 episodes that we've done.
There's a reason
And it
this podcast is even a thing.
Yes. And it just wasn't. It just kept being pretty much the same storyline with just a lot more talking. And I honestly didn't feel like all the talking was necessary, especially like here's a couple scenes that come to mind. The proposal of Mr. Collins to Elizabeth. So long. He says so many words. And,
But
The paragraphs are so
but it's like
big.
satirical.
long.
Like it's like satirical, and like knowing Mr. Collins' character, and like you read the words and then you get like, you know, Lizzie going like, you are way ahead of yourself. Like, I haven't even given you a response yet. And then he just like dives back in and keeps going.
Mhm.
Like it's funny. It's funny. Like
maybe I didn't find it amusing in the amount that you probably did.
I do agree though with Taylor that the essence of everything is there. I mean,
Yeah,
we
like-
That's true.
literally get the essence of everything that happens in
Like
the
that
book.
and you
proposal
still get
scene-
Mr. Collins' very weird, fluffily worded like monologue.
yeah.
The little flower he sets down.
Yes.
Honestly.
Which is like so much more sad because he is this just small man. Like,
And so I
put
think
his heart on the line.
like that scene's a great example where like I felt like I got the same amount of enjoyment and the same vibe from the movie and the book, but the movie it was over a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And I like could move on with the story. And I think for me, who I love Pride and Prejudice for the story, not necessarily the writer.
Mhm.
For me,
do
I was like,
too,
yeah,
but
let's
the writing is
let's
also
move it along.
beautiful. So how
Yeah.
dare you?
there it is. There it is. So for
First of all, how dare you? No.
for those of you out there who maybe don't want to read a ton of dialogue, you can fret not that you're not missing out on too much of the story by just watching the movie. Like, you're getting the same
it's
story.
true. But my number one will tell you why you still need to read the books.
There you go. So we're just gonna have the two sides here. But I personally felt like that was the biggest difference between the book and the movie was just the pure amount of dialogue
Mhm.
going on.
Mhm.
And I'm not necessarily mad that they cut it out. That's all I'll say.
I
Well, and
think we got that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of that, we get some of those beautiful scenery shots too that add to that cinematography. And so
Mm. It's a give and take.
yeah.
I'm okay. I'm with you on like, of course I didn't need all that dialogue, and a benefit of a movie is they can show.
Mhm.
Whereas in a book, you kind of have to show by telling, you
Mhm.
know?
Oh yeah,
Like,
for sure.
True.
by describing and yes, Jane Austen, a lot of her showing is done through dialogue between characters. So
Mhm.
you don't need all that dialogue
And I
in the
think-
movie where you can physically see it happening.
Yeah.
So
And I think for me, I'm not saying that you shouldn't read the book. Like, I think there's definitely merits to reading the book, but I don't always have hours and hours to read this book.
Mhm.
And it's nice to know that I can get the same story in like a 2-hour movie. And
Mhm.
I'm really
Hey,
not
the
missing that
audiobook is
much.
free on Audible. So
Yeah,
you can
it's
listen
still
to it.
like 12 hours long.
listen to it at 1.5 speed.
It's still 8 hours long. That's what I did for this podcast.
Hey, but still, that you can listen to that in a matter of a couple of days. With 8 hours spread across 4
In
days.
2 hours, I can get the same story and it's beautifully done. So,
That's facts. Except you still miss out on
and here we go.
my number one. You miss out on so much of Mr. Darcy himself. So I love how, as we've kind of already mentioned, that the book is very third person, whereas the movie is third person with a focus on Elizabeth. The book is very third person, where in the very beginning, like right from the get-go, you get these like thoughts of Darcy. Like you get to hear his thoughts. You don't get that in the movie, you know? And because he is such just like this, he's very stoic. He's slow to let his walls down and let new people in, you know, and he's extremely loyal and a great friend once you break through those walls, but it's a little challenging to get to that point. You know what I mean? And in the book, you get these inner thoughts where it's like, no, it would be good to spend, you know, some time over here where he's not by Elizabeth, because why does he keep thinking about her? You know, it's just like all these things. You get these cute little like inner thoughts of Darcy where it's like, he was much more careful about not mentioning anything else about Miss Bennet when Caroline was around, because she wouldn't shut up about his comment about her kind eyes.
Her
you know what I mean?
Her fine eyes.
Yes, her
eyes
kind,
and like
fine eyes.
and it's just like you get all of these little things where it's like you don't get any of that in the movie. And of course, Matthew Macfadyen is a phenomenal Darcy, and I still love his Mr. Darcy, and I think he does a phenomenal job. Not to mention that just in general, the way that the movie portrays it, where it's like as the movie goes on, he smiles more. They like change just ever so slightly the way they do his hair, you know, just like little things that make him more attractive as the movie goes on.
It's
They
less around
do
the
it on
neck.
purpose.
It loosens, his clothes slowly loosen and come further down the neck until that
Yep.
last scene where it's like open.
Straight up. It's very intentional. Like, but and so like, and I still think he does a great job, and I still love the movie Mr. Darcy, but I love getting that look inside of his head in the book, where you know in the book where he's at the whole time. And in the movie you don't so much, kind of like you said, where it's like you learn it when Elizabeth learns it, whereas in the book you know from the get-go, like he likes her, something about her like just won't leave him alone. And he is, from like the very first moment at that, you know, public ball, having this inner like battle with like, I'm expected to like marry this, and this, and I'm expected to do all this stuff with my life, but it's like something about her, I can't get her out of my brain. But ooh. And it's like, yeah, maybe he shouldn't have mentioned those things to her when he proposed that first time. But he learns. And it's just by getting more of inside of his thoughts and feelings, I feel like it adds that much more to their relationship as a whole, and like the story of how they get together. And it is, you know, it's enemies to lovers. What can I say? I'm a sucker for that trope, man. It's just
me
my
too.
favorite
It's
one.
my favorite.
It's my favorite one, and I know where I get it from. It's from this book. So, as well as tall, dark, and handsome. Like I just want a Mr. Darcy in my life.
If you love in the movie when we get to hear the letter that he writes to Elizabeth, and you haven't read the book, basically the book is just that, like that times 10, you know, because you get to hear more of what he's thinking.
And that includes, on top of that letter, more of his reaction to what Lizzie says to him, because he's surprised, you know, he's like, what do you mean? Like, I'm offering you me, like, why are you behaving this way? And then you get, you know, his learning curve and his character development, because there's a huge amount of character development with Darcy's character, as well as Elizabeth's, because he overcomes his pride and she overcomes her prejudice. Comes full circle. You love a hidden message in a story, right? But yeah, I love Mr. Darcy so much that I'm sad that we miss pieces of him in the movie and you get
Mhm.
more of him in the book. So that's my number one.
Yeah.
I'll
That's fair.
finish
That's
with that there. I could keep going because I could talk about this book forever. But
Yes, but we have talked long enough.
We have a couple fan faux pas. Taylor, if you want to read the one that we got to our actual account, I had a friend send me one on my personal Instagram, so I'm gonna go
Okay.
pull that one up. But
Where
so
is
my
it?
friend Ivy, she mentioned she this is what she said to me. She said Tom Hollander as Mr. Collins, and then 15 of the like A-OK hand emojis. Because like seriously, like the way he plays that role is so good.
Yeah.
And I kind of
I feel
mentioned
like
earlier too.
I feel like we didn't touch on the cast enough. So let's just take a moment here to appreciate so well cast. Every
single one
Oh,
of them.
one
yes.
of them.
And they
Mr.
like
and Mrs.
all
Bennett.
went on to be pretty dang successful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like a lot of them, this is one of their like earlier roles, but then I mean, this has Carey Mulligan in it. She plays Kitty.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Rosamund Pike plays Jane.
Rosamund Pike.
Mhm.
Lydia, Jenna Malone, I think. She goes on to be in the Hunger Games series. Like
Mhm.
Mhm.
they're all very successful.
Speaking of Hunger
So,
Games,
yeah.
Donald Sutherland is Mr.
Yeah.
Bennett.
President Snow.
No,
I wonder
Mr.
how that
Bennett.
worked. She went from he's my loving father figure to he's the president of this nation I hate. Like but
And
Like
of course,
Mr. Bingley.
Dame Judi Dench
Oh yeah,
as
Judy
Lady
Dench.
Catherine. I mean, come on.
I'll watch anything with
So
Judi Dench in it,
good.
let's be real. If they were to remake this movie, like do another like adaptation of this movie, I would expect her to still be Lady Catherine.
Honestly, she could still do it.
Yes.
Like, you got to come back.
Ugh.
It's good.
Okay. And then
Do you have the other
we
one?
have one. Do I say her name or do I just say our mom?
Yes, our mother is in agreement with me. Thank you very much.
Yes. She says the movie loses some of the detailed dialogue that I love. The banter between Miss Bennett and Mr. Darcy. Sorry, Mom. I don't love it as
Dialogue's
much.
The dialogue's good.
Less talk, more kiss. That's what I'm all about.
Well, that's something else that the movie adds because they don't
Yeah.
actual kissing in the book in the early 1800s. That would have been a big
Mhm.
no-no. So, but they add that scene. It's beautiful, and it's
Mhm.
only in,
Gorgeous.
I think, like the DVD version. Like it's an added scene, like that wasn't in the original release. That scene at the end.
Oh,
with them
really?
sitting outside.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't
like,
know that.
Pemberley.
Mhm.
And it's such
Yeah.
a beautiful, amazing scene.
Yeah.
And just
Mhm.
glorious.
It's so
and-
cute.
But it's not in like every version, I don't think, if I'm remembering correctly.
I
Because
don't
I
know.
remember watching it one time.
Mhm.
I think it was on a cruise, Taylor. Were you with Amber and I when we were out? Yeah, you were there.
Yes,
We were
in the hot tub.
and they were playing it. And then it ended, and I was like, well, where's the kiss scene? Where is it? And it was like cut, like it wasn't there.
I
And
think that
so-
was maybe a censored version for the cruise because,
Censored?
kissing is not appropriate.
it was extreme. It's an extremely tender and beautiful moment. It's not something that needs
Yes,
to be
it
censored.
is.
But I
Right.
think I remember reading somewhere too that like that scene
Mhm.
wasn't originally like released in like the theatrical version or something. I can't
Mhm.
remember. But
It makes sense though because it is so intimate, and
Mhm.
if they're playing to this is a period piece, we would not see something like that. That
Yeah,
happens
that's like
behind closed
inside
doors.
their home. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
but
But it's
that's
so
kind of been
good.
thrown out the window lately with
Yeah.
period pieces.
That
Look
is
at Bridgerton.
that is
Look at the Bridgerton series. That's a period piece, and we see
Yeah.
all the intimate details in that
Yeah,
series.
that's true.
Too
That is
too many.
true.
Too many intimate details in that one. They swung too far.
TMI. No.
Oh, but I do.
no, we'll talk
I
about
love that
Bridgerton
scene
eventually.
and the dialogue. Only if you're
Mhm.
perfectly and incandescently happy.
Definitely happy.
Oh, yes.
Oh, and I
So
love
good.
you most ardently. Just
Mhm.
Oh.
it's a good one.
Mhm.
Okay, well, age-old question. What's the book better? It's not the movie's not better than the book. But I also don't think I'd say the book's better than the movie.
No.
I know. I have to say they're equal in my eyes. Honestly,
Uh-huh.
they are both just so beautiful,
so
and
good.
I can't
They're
I
so
can't pick. I can't pick.
No, I could not. Yeah, I almost, and this is a personal opinion, I almost think the book is better for the reasons I stated before, where it's just
Mhm.
You mean the movie? Because if you were saying the
I mean
book
the
was
movie.
better, then that wouldn't be that surprising.
Sorry.
But
the movie
then, like,
is
woo.
the movie is slightly better in my eyes for the reasons I stated before.
Mhm.
Less talk, more kiss. That's why.
There's
That
still
is
not
my
much kissing in the
campaign.
movie.
That is my
not.
campaign for the movie being better.
And the kiss scene in the movie wouldn't have been as great as it was without the amazing.
It was still really good.
That's true.
I just putting that out there.
Stop.
There's no words.
Mhm.
The
But I do
It's
think
so
everyone
witty.
needs to read it at least once in their
And
life.
or
I
listen to
definitely
it,
think it's
'cause
one
it
of
is
those
a good-
books.
Rosalie
Yeah, or listen.
Pike,
Mhm.
who is Jane in this movie,
Who played
is
Jane?
the reader. Like, she narrates the audiobook on
Mhm.
Audible. So,
Yeah,
and again,
it's
free.
really fun because when she reads Jane's lines, you're like,
Oh,
oh,
it's Jane.
it's Jane. And I feel like her reading is very influenced by the movie that
Mm.
she was in. Like a lot of her voices, I'm like, that's oddly similar to this person, or that's oddly similar to this person. Like the Mrs. Bennett voice, I feel like is
Mm.
The
very
shrill.
similar.
Oh.
Yes. The
Oh,
Mr.
shrill.
Collins, like the awkwardness of Mr. Collins, I
Mhm.
feel like is very similar. So it's fun. It was especially fun listening to her read it, knowing we were comparing it to this movie.
Mhm.
Definitely.
So it's a tie.
Yeah,
There we
it's a
go.
tie. This one ends in a tie. It's not the only one to have ended in a tie.
No,
had a
we've
few
done it
others.
before.
Great Gatsby was another one, but it's also another one of my favorite books, right? Like, my favorite books, when they have a really good movie adaptation, I'm like,
Mhm.
well, the movie definitely cannot be better, but like, they can be equals, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, but okay. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you want more Pride and Prejudice talk, fear not. We will be talking about the other adaptations that you can find in our mini-sode next week. And otherwise, our next book that we'll be doing, oh my gosh, is it already going to be March? Are we beginning?
No. We have one more February,
No, we don't.
right? Yes, we do.
No, we're beginning the Percy
Oh my
Jackson
goodness.
series. Percy Jackson's all
Wow.
March. Like,
Wow. That's true.
It is
March is Percy
happening.
Jackson month.
yes. And we're going to be having We Ship It join us for one of the Percy Jackson episodes. I don't know if we've decided which one yet, but that will be fun to have We Ship It join us for an episode again. That'll be good. But we have had so much fun having you join us, Alex. Thank you so much
Yes.
for
Thank
coming
you.
on. As a reminder to everyone, you can find her over on Instagram, or Bookstagram more specifically, which is really the only part of Instagram you really need to be a part of these days.
Yes.
The
Well,
world is
thank
sad.
you. Thank you so much. I have had a blast, and I love you guys, and I love your podcast, and it's just an honor to be here and to be on it. So thank you.
Thank you. Shucks, no. But yeah, this episode, I mean, it has been so fun because it's one of my favorites, but it's just been a lot of fun talking about it with you. And you know, not gonna lie, it's nice to have you validate my English major views on things. So
Hey, I'm here for you anytime.
it feels good to be validated, you know.
Just outnumber. It's
But-
fine.
But thank you to everyone for joining us and tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and we hope that you have a great week.
And don't forget to read.
And
And stop.
I mean, it's not even our longest episode, so
No.